Hey, we're live. In my car. Been sleeping here. When I'm not in the deep green. And I drove all this way just to speak to you. Now I can't read um, the live chat because it's bright and it's black, and you guys print in small. You never use caps. Anyway, here it is, and it's black like me, and I'm poster boy for being the whitest black guy there is. And just wanted to tell you a little story about the Green family. Back in the 70s, late 69, because I was working for Grandpa and Mike Stoll, and I was fixing things. And at the time, Soho wasn't Soho, it was an industrial area, that big lofts, right? And everything north of Houston had numbers, avenues and numbers. Everything south of Houston, and that's what Soho means, south of Houston, is, and Tribeca stands for Triangle Below Canal. So all of that area south of Houston is all old New York, right? What it was, right? Along with the, Lower East Side, right? Alphabet City. And that's where the Five Corners were, right? And actually, the Five Corners were kind of where basically the Bowery and East Broadway kind of come across. And that's right where the Manhattan Bridge is, and the Williamsburg Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge. They all kind of coerce right at that little neck of the woods. And the first one was the Brooklyn Bridge, and then Williamsburg Bridge, Manhattan Bridge came next, and then the rest of them. And the Green family were from the South Bronx, but they had their fingers in everything. They were, part of the Harlem elite. But the Bronx, why it's called the Bronx? The Bronx. I don't call it the Brooklyn or the Queens or the Manhattan or the Staten Island, but it's the Bronx, is because it was named after a family, the Bronx family. And they had a big farm. And that's where all the food and dairy and everything came from, was the Bronx. And then in the late 17 somethings, before the revolution, that's where the rich people kind of went and bought chunks of that farm and built their estates, right? And so that was the Bronx. I live up in the Bronx, up there, and it was up in the hills. And it's the only thing close to being hilly in New York City is the Bronx. And where everything below Houston basically was a marsh, right? Especially Lower East Side and the West Side. Basically everything below Houston was a marsh, right? With typhoid and malaria and mosquitoes and dengue, you name it. The Green family were one of the first black families that were basically free and entrepreneurial, right? And they had like an employment agency. So they didn't own black people, but they employed them. And for servants, right? And then they basically got guilds together, and carpenters and masons and, stable folk and house folk and farm folk. And the Green family had a cut of everything. And so they were somewhat like the mob, but more socially, together. Hey, Fish, good to see you, buddy. I haven't seen you in a long time. And so that was the Green family. And Benny was from the Brown family, and he actually he was Jamaican, and he was related to Mrs. Brown. And when I lived in the Grill, and when I came back, and I bumped into Benny because he was the super for about 20 buildings of Soho, the ones that Sylvan Lawrence owned, right? And they're all, every floor was like a factory making buttons or this, and had all these like 19th century machines. No one wanted to fix those. But Grandpa Stoll did, and he made a good chunk of change. And he taught me how to fix those machines, where I learned my skills as a person to troubleshoot things, right? And that's why I did pretty well when I worked for Xerox, because I could figure out what was really wrong with their crazy machines. So I would come and work on these things, and most of the electricity in these buildings was still DC, because these were industrial buildings back in the day of Edison, and Edison wired everything up to Houston Street, right? And then when he moved uptown and did all the rich people's things, he put generators and, steam engines and generators in each of their estates, so they had their own electricity, because transmitting it was a bitch. DC at that time couldn't go any further than 6 miles, and then had a severe voltage drop. And that's why they had these things called dynamotors, where they had a generator and a motor. So all of the subways up until the 1980s still had these crazy Frankenstein, Rube Goldberg, 19th century dynamotor things. And again, Grandpa Saul was one of the only guys who fixed these, and he taught because he started Local 3, and the Metropolitan subway system was a Local 3 gang. He taught them all how to deal with that stuff. He taught me how to deal with it too, and he got me into the union to, teach these guys how to deal with it. And that's how I got into the union at age 17, and I was, I was an apprentice, but I was, had journeyman status, because I was Grandpa Stoll's boy. But Benny was this, entrepreneurial black man from Harlem via Jamaica. He still had his Jamaica twang. And he ran all these buildings, but they all had gigantic basements, because they all had, before the day, steam engines down there with big belts going up, running machines, right? And mostly machines that were manufacturing things like cloth and buttons and, for the garment district uptown. So Benny took all those big basements, smashed holes, and a lot of them had firewalls between them, so they had fire doors. So he turned all of, these 10 buildings in 3 blocks that were connected by tunnels and stuff, into one gigantic gambling, prostitution, opium den, good time place. And he was making some severe money. And he was under the protection of Mike Finelli. And Mike Finelli was one of them, the main dons. And he wasn't like the other ones shooting each other. They were, So the Green family actually was one of the most connected families, politically, banking, you name it, they were connected. So Finelli was connected to the Green black family of Harlem, right? And up in the Bronx, the South Bronx. And Mrs. Green, she was a matriarch of that, gangsta family. And she didn't sell drugs, or she didn't do numbers or prostitution. She sold connections, which were more valuable than anything. But she was pretty powerful politically. And she had 3 boys, and Eddie and William, called him Billy, and Stuart, right? And he was little, and so they called him Little. And he was like Mr. Kung Fu. He saw himself as the guy from the Green Hornet, and so Bruce Lee. So anyway, Eddie, first, Benny said, listen, I see you fixing things. I see you running things. I see you making things. I see you, but I need you. And I go, what for? He goes, well, people want me to do what you're doing, but I have no time because I'm running my other business. I said, but you're the super of 10 buildings. You're getting paid to do. He says, no, no, no. Yes, I am the super of 10 buildings, but that, you know. And I go, okay. And go, what do you want me to do? So all I want you to do is fix the odd thing and sweep out the hallways, and you know, and you can do what I do. I said, you know, I'm supposed to run all these elevators. I don't do that. I hire somebody to do that. If you know somebody to sweep the halls out, they're not a problem. I said, okay. So what are you going to pay me? He goes, oh, I got something for you that's better than money. And he took me up to the top floor of this building on Worcester Street, and it was 7,000 square feet. And this building had 3 elevators, and this floor had its own frigging elevator that went out to the side, not out to Worcester Street, not out to Broadway, but out to this alley that went to both, right? And it had, both of them had gates with a lock. He goes, you have your own elevator, right? And he goes, no one's used this floor forever. And there's this, you know, over here is DC. There's no AC, but there's DC. Now, you're a smart guy. You can figure this out. And it was this wooden box filled with tar, and there's actually a three-phase DC. And before, you know, Edison finally knelt to Morgan and, you know, the Tesla Westinghouse, you know, he went to three-phase too. So anyway, I built a rectifier, and I nailed through the tar, because there was a zillion amps, because this was the same DC running the frigging subway. That's why it wasn't turned off. All they did was cut the wire, build a wooden box around it, and pour tar in it. And I nailed these big spikes through the tar into the copper wire, and had welding cable and a welding clamp onto that nail going over to my rectifier. Boom. I had like 400 amps, 3-phase AC. Right? So I had all the electricity I needed. I had my own elevator. I had my own water line. I had gas. No one had read that gas meter since like 1908. So it was on. I didn't say anything. It was on, and I had my own heat, and there was a little, gas-fired hot water heater and a gas-fired, because somebody had been up there keeping themselves warm. I'm sure it was Benny, and it was quite nice. And it had skylights. It had like 30 skylights, at least 25 gigantic skylights, and the whole back wall, which was about 200 feet long, and the walls, the ceilings were 20-something feet high, gigantic wooden beams, and thick, heavy wooden floors, and it was all mine. Had two big bathrooms. It had one of the bathrooms. There was, a shower and a bath, and it was like maybe Benny's, own, or the manager guys. Anyway, so I made myself, that, and I had that free, and all I had to do is change the light bulbs, sweep out the hallways. There were only 10 hallways I had to sweep, so I didn't find anybody. I just swept them once a month, right? Because nobody ran up and down the hallways, and I would fix a few things here and there for Benny, right? And I had this 7,000 square foot loft, free electricity, free gas, free heat, free hot water, no rent, and my own elevator and my own entrance. No one saw me coming and going. And it was great, right? And so I was there for a whole year. And, because I was never always there, because, I was still freaking going to prep school. And so, I'd be away for a few months, and then I'd come back. I would get back into New York around the beginning of May, right? Because our prep school, we ran from the end of the October 1st to May 1st, because we were there 24/7. We only came home for Christmas. We had no fall break, no spring break, and we went to school on Sunday. So we were there, 7 days a week, right? And I went to school with the richest people in the world. Eddie Merrill, Ricky Lynch, Marilyn Lynch, Alex Orb, U.S. Steel. Um, you name the corporation, and they're in my class. There are only 26 guys, and every one of them, their father owned something. And the guy, you know, the Kennedys, Robert Kennedy's boys came to our school. I say we're screw ups. It was a school for screw ups. Everyone got kicked out of at least one school, if not more. I got thrown out of the seminary in a big way. I mean, I had street cred. People kept looking at me as I was, something between Don Corleone and Manson, and Manson wasn't even Manson yet. So anyway, I had this place for 4 years, not a problem. Around the fourth year, I'm having a nice old time, and there's bum, 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 bum. I hear this crazy noise coming through the wall, and all of a sudden the wall comes crumbling down like there's an earthquake, and there's a black guy on a little cat that has a pneumatic hammer, and he has gotten all of the top floors of these buildings, and he's going to turn it into a nightclub. And he hasn't come and talked to me. Benny says, "Oh, you got to talk to Al. He's got that one. You better not." And what Eddie wanted was my floor because it was a private elevator with two entrances, one on Broadway and one on Worcester Street. And so he didn't come to me and say, "Hey, how you?" He came to me, And by this time, I was Mr. Disco, right? Anyway, so he smashes through the thing and he drives in with his cat and he's like doing wheelies and he turns it off and he's covered in, concrete dust, and he's a black guy, but he looks like he's white because he's covered in concrete dust. And I'm just sitting there and I'm sitting in a lazy boy and I'm smoking a pipe and he kind of smashed through where I really wasn't. I was kind of like on the other side. And he smashed through. I guess he kind of scoped me out before smashing through. He wanted that kind of entrance. Anyway, so he came over and he had some dank weed. I mean, dank, right? And, and he had it in like a suitcase. And he came over with a suitcase and he flipped it open and he had, he in his little cat, bulldozer with the pneumatic. He had a big, ice chest and this suitcase. And he came over with the ice chest and the suitcase and a folding chair, his own folding chair. And he pulled out an amazing Italian hero that he got at Luna's. And he, the cooler was full of these heroes and sausage and, fresh, made mozzarella, which they made on Spring Street, and wine and other liqueurs, right? All chilled, very cool, right? And he took out, a folding table and this chair, and he had plates and knives and forks and napkins. And he lays it all out, and then he packs. He says, "Oh, your pipe. What are you smoking?" And I was smoking something. And he cleans it out, and he does an amazing job. He's got pipe cleaners. He cleans up. He's serious about it. He packs my pipe with this dank, lamb's breath. He goes, "This is lamb's breath." And I had come from Jamaica, so I knew what lamb's breath was. And I said, "Wow." And so before he even introduced himself, he's got the spread out, the pipe lit, and he goes, "I'm one of Benny's nephews." And I said, "Benny, how can you don't know Mrs. Brown?" He said, "Oh, I know Mrs. Brown, Jamaica, right? Negril, right? You came from there. You're Mrs. Brown's boy. You wired Rick's." And he goes through my pedigree. You work for Mike and Grandpa. He just went. Mike Finelli. That he just went down, and he goes, "I got a proposition for you." And I go, "What's that?" And he goes, "I'm going to turn these 3 buildings here, this top floor, into a nightclub. And I know you work in nightclubs and you work in theater and you're Mr. Lighting. You're the dude. I am going to pay you X for this space, and I'm going to give you a residual every week, right? And I'm going to pay you another chunk of change to wire and light this place and turn it into one of those amazing clubs that you have. This is going to be high end, only private, everything. It's going to be more fancy than Studio, 45. So I go, and he writes down on a little piece of paper. And I say, so where am I going to live? And he goes, well, you can still live here. All I'm really looking for is those entrances in that elevator. We'll just build a wall back here. This is where you're living, bathrooms and all that right here. We'll just run a pipe so people can, because the others didn't have the drainage or the water or nothing. They didn't even have electricity. So I said, okay, it sounds, and he goes, not only that, you'll be my brother. The first time I ever heard this, brother. I said, brother, okay. You'll be part of the family. And, I want to, and we shook hands, no contract, no nothing. And he said, I'm going to leave all of this here, the sandwiches, the sausage, the mozzarella, the wines, the liqueurs, and the suitcase. It was at least, a key, if not more, and I want to take you uptown. I want you to meet my mom and my brothers and the family, that you're going to be part of the family. And I said, okay. And I guess I was, I guess I was 18, give or take, 17, 18. It was, my next year was going to be my last, I had finished my junior year this summer. I guess I was still 17. Anyway, so, and I had already lived, on 9th Street with, Allen Ginsberg in the nunnery. And so I was already the dude. I was part of the avant-garde community. And I knew some black artists, but I wasn't part of the black community. I mean, I kind of was because I grew up in Harlem, but that was more like in my DNA. But, and guys, I can't read any of this. It's really bright. I can't see anything. Oh, look, John's there. Hey, John, I'm going to give you a call a little later. I'm heading your way in a week or so. Anyway, so, we go down, and Eddie's got a really nice Mercedes, not a, race car, but a nice touring Mercedes, and windows tinted to the legal limit of New York City. And he's got plates on them that are like, if he was a, state representative, they would, it had that little seal of a state legislator, right? And that's because his mom had all her cars were licensed as a state which meant no cop was going to stop this car. No cop's going to give it a parking ticket or nothing. It's like even the mob didn't have these license plates, but Eddie's mom was. Anyway, so we, get in the car. We zip out on the Houston Street. We zip over to the FDR Drive, and we zip up. It's like just before 3 o'clock, so there's not much traffic there yet. And we zip all the way up over the Tappan Zee into Brooklyn Queens Expressway, then all the way up to, Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard, and zipping into the South Bronx, into right where the big park is. And we go through the park, and there's a road right in the middle of the park. There's a road that goes up to this big, like, estate. And we kind of and it was one of the Bronx's, gigantic 19th century, amazing, something on the order of the Biltmore House. And it's Mrs. Green's house, and she's got this lawn. It's like a golf course, and on one side it's the BQE, but it's way over there. You can't even hear it. And on the other side is the Harlem River, and on the other side is the West Side Highway. So she's got, and the other side is the park. So there's nothing around her. Right? She's got three major physical, where no one, you'd have to go across the highway or the river or that highway to get onto her land. And it was like, so we drive up this big fancy driveway. We go there, and there's this big roundabout, and we come through, and there's a portico, and and there's a guy who comes and welcomes him there and takes the car and drives it into the garage. And I go in with Eddie. He was Eddie, not Edward, not Eddie, Eddie. That's what they call everybody. His mother called him Eddie. Everybody called him Eddie. Mother called him sweetheart. But anyway, and so I walk in, and everyone's black. There are no white people there. And she goes, Ethel told me about you. And that was Mrs. Brown in Jamaica, Anyway, so she sits me down, and she goes, she goes, I know your pedigree. You are my son. Just like these boys, you are my son. And I go, thank you, Mrs. Green. So, and I said, and so I didn't say anything. I knew better to ask any real questions. I just let her ask me the questions, and I gave her a succinct, and she goes, and I hear you know Benny really well. He says only the best about you. And I said, so he's from the Browns, yeah, Mrs. Brown's, and she goes, yes, but we're related. And I didn't even question that. So we had this amazing dinner of Southern and Jamaican and West Indian food. And their servants had loads of servants, and these all were people from the islands. There was no one from there. But they were all family, right? And she goes, these are all family, but they're from the different sections. Just like Mrs. Brown Ethel, she's from, another side. We have many sides to our family, but we're all one. We're all and she would use the term, all our relations. And so, I was now part of the Green Clan, right? And that was truly amazing because after having this great meal, and she would roll blunts just like the Rastas did, and she had dreads. She was immaculately dressed, like in the finest of fine, but she had dreads, right? And so we had this really fine dinner, and she goes, now we're going, here's some music. So we get in, and she has a 1940 Rolls Royce. That's like a rolling living room, right? And me and her three boys and her daughter get in the car, and I get in, and the chauffeur, and they have two guys, for security. And I said, who are they? And they said, well, she goes there, and she goes, they're for security. And we pull out, and we go, sideways, and then down Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard into Harlem, and we go to a really super black club, right? And was straight out of the movie Goodfellas, where Ray Leone, playing what's his name, the guy telling the story, brings his Jewish girlfriend to a nightclub where he comes in through the kitchen, right? And everyone knows him. Hey, Arthur, or whatever his name, Anthony, or whatever his name was. And, they bring out a table. They put it right there, and there's Tony Bennett, right? Well, it's just like that. But there was a section right on the stage That was the Greens. No one ever sat there except the Greens, right? And we walked in again. Side, we didn't come in through the front door where there was a line of people waiting, and we came in like the green entrance. And this is where I think the term the green room came from. This family, in theaters. So we walked in and we sat down, and they bought the ice bucket with the champagne and a bunch of pastries and a bunch of little finger foods, and they said, "Here are the specials tonight. You want any of it? What do you want? You want anything different to drink? And I'm just sitting there watching it all. And Mrs. Green brings over the owner of the place and introduces me to the owner, right? And she goes, anytime he comes, he's going to come in our entrance. I told the doorman, I told, Joey this is he's part of the family. And this is Al, he's part of the family. He's one of the Greens, right? And I'm going like this. And the owner's looking at me like, really? And so I'm there, and it's like amazing, just freaking amazing. And the musicians, so who was singing there that night but Satchmo, right? With his cornet, trumpet, and his band, and they were playing, old New Orleans blues, right? And after the end of that set, he comes over and he sits down and is amazingly respectful to everyone. And she introduces me to, Satchmo, and it's like, and she goes, Al, you can, and then he says, Al, you can call me Satchmo. Not everyone can call me Satchmo. Yes, it's out in the thing, but people don't call me that unless I tell them they can call me that, and you can call me that. And I say, thank you, And so anyway, so they play on tonight, and then we go to another nightclub where there's dancing, and it's Hispanic. And again, Mrs. Green she's speaking Spanish to the owner, and we're in Spanish Harlem, and blacks and Hispanics don't mix too well. But Mrs. Green, she's like the UN. And the owner is like unbelievable. And again, they have their own freaking neck of the woods of the dance floor, right? They have their own little a place where the Greens sit. And so we go to that, and they're playing, conga, and they're playing, marimba, and they're playing, every kind of Cubano music. This place is more Cubano than Puerto Rican. And Eleanor, which was the daughter, very attractive, in her late 20s. I was in my 19, 17, 17, yes. Anyway, she goes, you like to dance? Says, oh yeah, I'm a dancing fool. So and we danced, and she sweated and pressed her flesh against mine. And it was like, whoa, we were about to catch fire there. And I love spinning women. And so and I can marimba with the best of them. I can conga with the best of them. And so, I'm spinning her around, and she's loving it. And they're all over there puffing away, and we go back, and we're drinking champagne, and we're puffing, and we have a great night. And when we leave, the sun is freaking coming up, right? So Eleanor does not live in that neck of the woods. Where she lives is kind of near Gracie Mansion, right? She has her own house. Greens have a house right next to the mayor's house, and she lives there. And she's a lawyer, And so she goes, Mom, it's only about 20 blocks to my apartment. And you couldn't quite drive there because you'd have to go way up north, go over the Tappan Zee, come around and go there. And so she goes, we can just walk. And she goes, well, Tony will go with you, right? One of the guys who, security. And so she and I are walking, and up there's this very nice walk that goes along the Harlem River down into the East River, and it's very beautiful. And it's very, almost natural, right? It's park there, and haven't really built stuff, and industry was never there, and just right there is Gracie Mansion, right? And there's a big park, and she has a house right next to it, right? So we're walking, and he's like walking behind, keeping an eye on everything. We're holding hands, and we're walking along, and so we get to her place, and we go in there, and she has, servants too. Her gatekeeper is there, and who's her butler, and he's like Alfred, from Batman. He's English, and there's the women are Cubano, and she's speaking Spanish to everybody, even Alfred. And we walk in, and they have breakfast ready for us, and we out on the terrace, and it's like now about 6 a.m. The sun's kind of rising up over that bay where LaGuardia is, and you can see the airplanes coming and going, and it's far enough so it's not noisy or smelly. And we have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful breakfast. And she goes, "You want to take a shower?" And I said, "Sure." So we go up to her floor, and she's got this amazing shower. So we take a shower, and we rub-a-dub each other, and we kiss a little bit, and then we dry off. And she goes, "I'm going to bed. I'm going to have Alfred drive you wherever you want to go." And I go, "Well, thank you. That was and I didn't even have blue balls, And she goes, "I like you a lot, a lot, a lot. No one gets up here, So you don't have a girlfriend or anything." I said, "Nope, don't have a girlfriend." She goes, "Good. We're going to have a special relationship." I said, "Sounds good to me." Because I always had older women in my life as romantic. I was their muse, and they were my teacher. Right? So I learned what women like from older women, because they know what they like. Younger girls my age, except for the few girlfriends I had, like Teresa Flowerpot and Virginia Manley and Cassidy, and these are all people I went to school with. They were all still older than me by maybe a year or two, but anyway. So I got to know the Green family really well. And then we built the nightclub, so I spent a lot of time with the Green family. I would go home with them, because, I had a nice little loft, but boy, they had, an unbelievable place. And they had, pool and gym and servants and Eleanor, right? So, and the three brothers were like my brothers. They really became, especially Eddie, right? Because the others, Eddie, he was a nightclub guy, right? And the others had other business things that, they were busy doing other stuff, but we would hang. And they were three brothers that were, unstoppable, just amazing. Anyway, so we had the nightclub, and the nightclub was amazing. And like I said, it was fancier than fancy. And like I said, you come down to, this is in the days when nobody lived in Soho, so the limousines would line up, they would come to Worcester Street, and they would go through that gate. That's where the first level of security was. You had to get through the gate. And the gate had a TV camera, and you had, again, this is just in the days when, magnetic strips were just starting. And, hey, I had access to that stuff. So if you were a member of this club, you had a card with a magnetic strip, and, you put the strip in, the light went on, and the TV camera, you had to look up at it, and on the little screen at the, about 50 feet up there with the doorway into where the, vestibule for the elevator was, And it was a big elevator. It was an industrial elevator. You could stick 50 people on it, shoulder to shoulder. But and we had an elevator operator, a woman in a very interesting outfit, and the guy who did the Mud Club was a member of this, and he got a lot of his ideas for the Mud Club from this club. And so um, the Mud Club was great because it was one of the first. It was a building that had been one of the first department stores. So it was 6 floors, and they had 4 elevators, but they were opened very Rococo kind of design, early Otis elevators, and so this, our little nightclub was really, and I had them. The floors were, super thick wood floors because they had these gigantic machines on them. Well, they were no longer there. But we sandblasted all the gunk out of all over the place, except for places that looked really cool that had the gunk on it. And so after we sandblasted everything, we then, the kind of stuff, what do you call it? It's when you lay down stone and then you terrazzo. We terrazzoed the floors, but kept it wood, but finished it that way, and then covered everything in super duper thick, almost fiberglass polyurethane, right? Very clear, very strong. And the dance floor was amazing, right? And we had an amazing sound system, and we had these different alcoves because there were basically 4 buildings. And so we made a gigantic, especially where the dance floor was, a arch. It was, the top floor of all these buildings, and they were, except one was a little bit lower. So we had to make a landing, a mezzanine, where you went over here to where the bars and all of these, we call them the cocoons, these little places where the VIP room was, where you could, and they were like, the cocoons were like individual VIPs. It's like if you could anything you wanted in there. And so this was pretty amazing kind of stuff, the stuff of legend. And that's a reminder. Hi, this is your Sensei Al Bob, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, here you are. And I can't read a word any of that is. Elaine, I can see it's you. Hey, baby. And again, I'm wearing 2 pairs of glasses, and I still can't see it because it's so bright out. And I'm in my car because I'm a homeless guy. See, this is how homeless guys are. I'll give you a little view of my digs. This is how homeless guy. He's living in his car. Yes, I have the deep green, but it's it's very similar to this. Because I'm camping out. Yes, it is Cadillac camping. But it's still what it is. I still, I'm not living the posh bourgeois life that most, if you have toilets and running water and electricity, that's posh bourgeois life to me. I mean, I kind of have all of that, but it's all, I'm always having to fix stuff. Like my water comes from a spring about 400 feet. I got like lots of broken hoses, and they always, because it's about 200 feet above, I got unbelievable water pressure, right? And I have to let it leak because if it was, if I kept it from leaking, it would bust through the hose. So because it's leaking, it's not going to bust through the hose. But every now and then, where it's leaking, it'll bust through the leak. And then I'll wake up and the whole side of the hill is all wet. Anyway, so this was a pretty amazing time, the most highest level political, social, economic family that was Black in probably the United States, because, Dr. King was good friends with Mrs. Green. She'd write him a check for anything he needed. Malcolm X was a good friend of the Greens, and when he came to visit them, he remembered me as a little boy with my grandma coming to Central Park, Northern Central Park. He would give a speech there every Saturday. He'd have his ladder with the American flag, and he'd talk for about 4 hours, and then they'd, break the bread. And so that was my mother's milk. That's what I was raised on. And I would be wearing the clothes my father got me at Brooks Brothers. I'd wear my suit and my camel's hair coat and hat and tied businessman shoes. And we'd come off the ladder. He would pat me on the head and go, "Good white boy." And the first time we met at Mrs. Green, he looked at me, and said, "Aren't you that guy? Don't you have an Italian grandma? Didn't she always have a suitcase where she'd take all the leftovers back home? Aren't you that?" I'd pat you on the head. I said, "Yes." You used to say, "Good white boy." Because, "Well, you've grown up, and I see you're definitely with the right people." And I'm going, "Well, thank you, sir." And and that's when I started my relationship with Malcolm X. And I was very blessed that I got to know him for a year or so before, he was eliminated. And, he did not look at me as the white devil. I mean, if I was at Mrs. Green said, "He's part of the family." And he came to our nightclub, and so, but very soon he went to the Hajj. And when he came back, he had turned to a different guy. He realized that it wasn't black or white, it was class. And so he and both Martin realized this and went, "Hey, this is class. This is, you know, this is, it's, the white people are treated almost as bad as we are." And then they were eliminated because as long as they were talking about black and white, not a problem. Once they started talking about class and what the real issues were, that's when someone got it, right? So, anyway, so when Martin got it, Mrs. Green and the family went and went to that. They were invited. When X got it, they went to that funeral too. Huey Newton, they went to all those people. I went to X's and Martin's, but I didn't go to everyone. But because so many people were dying, and they were executions. If you were to go to if you go to dark journalism, right, on YouTube, and look at his X series, right, especially the last 10 or 20 of them, where he's going into, all assassinations. And, oh, man, it's getting uncomfortable. My butt is, it's 48 minutes I've been doing this. Anyway, so everything was great until, as long as these boys were just peddling weed, it was not bad. And I would keep going away, right? And coming back. And so I went away, and I went down to, once I graduated high school, I kind of had to stay. I went to college for one semester, and then I, blew town and I was on. That's when I, ran the rails and went to different college. I hid in plain sight. I mean, I didn't burn my draft card. I didn't, do anything against the law. I just wasn't there. My draft board couldn't find me. Where is, they'd send him the mail to this. Say, "Oh, he was just here, but he's not here now." So what happened was when I finally did come back, basically things were de-evolving and cocaine was on the scene and they were selling cocaine, and Mrs. Green didn't like that. So she didn't excommunicate her boys, but they were no longer in, living at her house. So that whole scene from, that movie, where they're, the guys are, selling cocaine and then crack, and they've taken over a whole building in the South Bronx. That was the Green Boys. That whole movie was about the Greens. And that was exactly what happened to them. And their nightclub, was then turned from the high, the high price political spread of the Green family no longer showed up there. It was now just a gangsta place. So when I went to, you know, came back from my little tour of America, because they finally caught up to me, and I had to, my draft board said, okay, we don't think we can trust you with a gun, so you want to do alternative service? I said, sure, sign me up. So they did, and that was for 6 years. And I first went to Vista, and they sent me down to Alabama to work at a black school, and I just raised too much cane, got people too riled up, got educated. I was like the white Malcolm X. And already Martin had been, assassinated. X was assassinated. Huey Newton was assassinated. All of the rest of the black leadership was assassinated, physically, period. Like I said, go to Dark Journalism and watch those shows. He's very clear, very, very historical, very to the, he really puts it down. He has people like Catherine Austin Fitz and Joseph P. Farrell and a whole bunch of other folks who really give the 411 of what's going on. And that's what's going on right now. And that's why I'm telling you the story. So, I went up and saw Eleanor, and she was distraught because her, just besmirched the name Green. And Mrs. Green was no longer the queen. She still had power and she had money, but she wasn't like she was when I first met her. Right? And in the black community, she was, but she was almost irrelevant because the mob and the CIA and the I got sun tan lotion. It's so fucking hot, sunny on top of a mountain, man. It's like being in a microwave oven. It was like a light switch. It went from raining every day and was starting to feel like a mushroom and never got above 50 to we had some really crazy weather for 3 days, and now it's 86 every day, and it doesn't get below 60 at night, which is okay. Once it goes below 80, 79 is not bad on top of a mountain, and I have a good breeze all the time. And I got this air conditioner that's called a waterfall, and the wind blows right by it, so I get this pretty cool air. Anyway, that's the beauty of the deep green. It's inconvenient. Yes, I have to drive 40 miles to do this for you guys or make a phone call. Or see a doctor. If I were to fall or hurt myself out there, I'd be dead. There's no one there, and no one comes and check. There used to be people that came and checked on me, but they're all dead. They either, died of alcoholism or, diabetes or heart disease or meth. And so it's being very quickly depopulated. And it would be gentrified. The rich real estate guys are trying to sell that property, but rich people don't want to go there. It's beautiful. It's really nice. It's got, all this water and lakes and waterfalls and rivers and hiking like you can't believe. But there are spirits in the woods. I built this thing called the temple. And, so I had a raised garden. But I stopped gardening about 8 years ago when I got fat and heavy, and then I got sick, and then I died. And then it took me 5-6 years to get over that. And so the topsoil that I had in my raised bed, kind of drooled out. And so it's just rocks because it's very shaly there, good drainage. So what I did was I dug into because this whole area was farms about 100 years ago. And so it has really good topsoil. But if you put it in a place where the water goes through it, it'll run it off. So I dug into the forest going up about, 150 yards, 200 yards, and I put steps because it's quite steep. But 40 degrees. And there's this clearing up there that's like a church. I call it the temple. And the sun comes, there's an opening, the sun comes through the trees. The tree is just like Limerick in Ireland. Where Limerick lace comes from is that the old ladies used to eat the mushrooms and then look at the patterns the sun did through the leaves, and then, macrame or yarn or do what they ever do with those little needles. And they would do lace, So, and that's what that looks like. You don't even have to eat mushrooms. And when I dug these steps out, I made this one flat platform where I put a hammock and a table and a chair. And there was a spirit living there, and it came up and it entered my body. And I've been having amazing dreams ever since, right? Every night. And that's what's been fueling my writing. So, and they're spirits that come and play. They have shushed all of the raccoons and things that used to bother me away, and now there are these cats, which are their and they are big feral cats. They weigh about 20 pounds. If you try to mess with these guys, they kill you. The raccoons, actually the bears are scared of these cats, but these cats come in and they hang out. They've all made little dens. They don't stay there. They don't piss there. They don't eat there. They don't try to get food there because they get plenty of food. They kill anything they want. But they come and they hang in these spots, and they represent spirits, right? And when I walk into a space where they're near, they'll stay there, but I won't even notice them. And what will happen is I will, get busy doing something or sitting or meditating. And I have hammocks everywhere because, I have no furniture. And so I'll sit down, and then this cat will get up, and it's only 3 feet over there under a bush, and it comes up, kind of doesn't come like within 5 feet of me, but it slowly walks by me and makes sure that I can see it. Then it kind of goes away and disappears. And you could keep walking down. I only clear the anyway. So all that dirt from all those steps and that thing, I brought down to my garden. So I probably moved 4 tons of dirt. So yeah, I've been working pretty hard, moving stone and moving dirt, and my garden is just, everything's popping up, and that's what I love about gardens. So the cats are, keeping all the animals away from the garden. So back to the greens. So I come back, and I go to my little loft, and one of the brothers is living in my loft. I said, whatever his name was, what are you doing here? You wife? And they said, oh no, the business plan has changed. I said, so where? He said, oh, I'll leave, I said, no, you're already here. I said, well, this place is big enough. There's, a whole nother thing. We'll just build another wall here, and I'll put a bathroom over there, and that'll be that. And he says, okay. So did that, and but I had to move after that. I mean, I lived there and I was there, but the clientele was so gangsta, and I mean, cartel kind of gangsta. It's like straight out of, meet my new little friend. Long story short, the Green family basically was executed. Eleanor is the only one who survived. Mrs. Green, the brothers, everybody else was killed. Benny, everybody. That was a clean sweep. And so from 1967 till 1977, I saw it go from this amazing cultural amazingness to everyone dead. And that's what we're seeing right now. And that's because as long as you're talking about, civil rights and black people, white people, the powers that shouldn't be the hidden table, the hidden hand, or the high table and the hidden hand, They don't care. That's all the distraction. But once you start talking about their business plan, right? And if you aren't talking about the alternative aesthetic, and I've been talking about this since the Green family died. When the Green family died, that's when I started saying, we knew it. We need a new way. We can't just do it the same old way. You can't just bring in new players. And so that's, the basic story. My butt is killing me, and I want to go home. And I have some more chores. This is my other chore time. What time is it? Almost 6:00. Yes. So I have between now and 9, where the sun is still up, and I can, dig things and garden and not get barbecued by the sun because it's already gone behind the mountain, and it starts to get cool and nice. And I just start a little fire, and that keeps the mozzies, because I'm out in the middle of the woods, and I've uncovered a great deal of earth. So all the no-see-ums and all the mosquitoes are they come out, but as soon as I make a little fire, that smoke, they just go away. So they kind of go down the stream into the next holler. And those are where all of the rich people have pushed the holler folk out. So they go eat the rich. Eat the rich. That's what I say. Okay, with that, I'm going to say see you later. Now, I have the access to my neighborhood store, which is 10 miles instead of 40 miles, but it has no phone line. So anyway, so John, if you're still there, I'm going to give you a call in a few minutes, see how you're doing. So there's a little story, and here we are. So gang, going out and marching, that's all well and good, but unless you are thinking about an alternative aesthetic, different way,